Hello there, my name is Destiny, and I'm making this video for Gabriel Gadfly's project Poetry Matters. In case you didn't know, April is National Poetry Month, and since poetry has always played a really big part in my life, I figured it would be worth it to do a video about why poetry really does matter. I remember when I was 3 years old, I had this major freak out on Christmas because I couldn't read the names on the gift tags for my Christmas presents. And over the next year, I was taught how to read. My family made sure I learned and everything, even though I was a little young. And from that moment on, I didn't want to stop reading. I read everything I could get my hands on. I read Dr. Seuss and fairy tales in the newspaper if I was bored enough, and I had read everything else I had on my bookshelf. And then when I was old enough, I came across Harry Potter, and that just kind of sealed the deal. I've been in love with reading ever since then. And around that same time, I discovered poetry. And it wasn't just poetry to me. Poetry was a term they used in English class that made it seem really boring. Poetry was these lines of words strung together to make metaphors that could lay an entire world, an entire person's life at your feet in a matter of minutes. And it was incredible. I loved it. I loved it so much, and I still do, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So I fell in love with poetry, and that meant that, of course, I had to learn how to write it. And when I was in 4th grade, I remember the first poem I ever wrote it's the first one I remember writing that was any good, was called Don't Judge Me. And I won a few awards for it and silly things like that. And I say silly because eventually I realized that that poem was more than just a gateway to a little bit of 4th grade fame. It was a way for me to put everything I was feeling into words. It was a way for me to put my story, my heart, my world on a few lines of paper and have it fall at the feet of someone else if they dared to read it. I realized I could put everything I was going through, a broken home, abuse, loss, everything, kids making fun of me at school, I could turn all of that into poetry. Poetry, this beautiful thing, this wonderful world of metaphors. I could do that. And now it's 10 years later. I'm 20 years old, I'm away at college, and I still write. But for a while, it had lost its meaning. It had lost its, one day I'm going to be a poet, oh my goodness, that's amazing feeling. And then I was lucky enough to stumble upon Gabriel Gadfly's website. And I realized that here was this guy who had built up this following, this fan base, and made this website and all these books and everything, and it was possible. That I didn't have to give up that dream. And that's when I slowly started to remember that poetry is more than words. It's more than a few scraps of paper. It's hope and happiness and anger and sadness and life. And that's why it's important. For as long as humans have existed, we've had poetry. We used to pass down our history like that. Just because it's 2013 and we have the internet doesn't mean that that should change. So, happy National Poetry Month. And I hope you remember, more than anything else, that poetry is not a lost art form. It still matters, especially to me.